"Hey, new office clerk." The voice carried across the orderly room before anyone had finished their first cup of coffee. "The coffee doesn't make itself, and those rosters won't refile themselves either. Real soldiers are working today. Try to keep up." Sergeant Kyle Dunmore said it loud enough for the whole bay to hear. That was the point. He stood with his hip against a filing cabinet, 27 years old, his sleeves rolled to regulation, his chin lifted toward the woman at the corner desk. Two junior soldiers laughed on cue, the way junior soldiers learn to laugh when the laugh is rent. The woman at the corner desk did not laugh. She did not look up at once. She finished the line she was reading, set her pen flat against the page, and only then raised her eyes. She was 45. Her hair was pulled back tight and pale under the fluorescent light. She wore a plain set of operational camouflage pattern, the combat uniform every soldier on the post wore, except hers carried no rank on the chest and no name tape over the pocket. The threads were bare. The uniform looked like it had been issued an hour ago to someone nobody had decided about yet. That was how Dunmore had decided about her. New transfer, no rank he could see. Parked at the worst desk in the room with a stack of in-processing forms. A clerk. She had cleared rooms in 4 countries. This one took her 3 seconds. Her eyes moved before they settled on him. Door to the corridor. Door to the copy room. The high window. The fire exit behind the supply cage. The count was automatic, older than thought. A habit worn into her, the way a riverbed is worn into stone. Then, and only then, her gaze came to rest on Sergeant Dunmore, and it rested there without heat, without fear, without anything he could use. "Understood," she said. One word. She picked her pen back up. Dunmore waited a beat for more. A flush, a stammer, the small collapse he liked to watch. None came. He covered the silence with a snort and turned back to his audience. "See, that's the thing about the schoolhouse types. They send us paperwork with legs." The juniors laughed again. The orderly room of 3rd Special Forces Group hummed around them. It was a low building of cinder block and hard light, the kind of room the Army builds 10,000 of and remembers none. Toner and burnt coffee, the clack of a date stamp, a printer somewhere chewing through a leave packet. On the wall, a unit crest, a dagger crossed with 3 lightning bolts, and below it, a row of photographs of men in green berets, some of them looking back from years that had already taken them. The woman's name was Rosalind Keene. In 9 days, she would stand in front of this group and take command of it. She had come early on purpose. She had asked the personnel shop to process her in quietly, plain, no announcement, because the surest way to learn how a unit truly runs is to be a person it believes does not matter. So she had let them sew nothing on her chest. She had let them give her the corner desk. She had become, for 9 days, exactly what Sergeant Dunmore saw. A specialist named Tova Brink crossed the bay with a working coffee mug, the good kind, not the waxed paper kind. She was 20, quick-eyed, knew enough to still believe the rules meant what they said. She set the mug at the corner of Keene's desk without quite stopping. "Don't mind him, ma'am," she said, low. Keene looked at the girl. Something in her face eased by a fraction of a degree, the way a closed hand eases. "Thank you," she said. Dunmore was there in 4 steps. He lifted the mug off the desk by the rim, 2 fingers, like it was contraband. "Brink, we don't run a cafe for transfers." He held it out to the specialist until she took it back, her ears going red. "Floor's not going to sweep itself either." Keene squared the stack of forms on her desk so the edges ran true to the desk's edge. A clean rectangle, corner to corner. It took her half a second, and she did not seem to notice she had done it. Then she went back to the forms. Across the room, a master sergeant came through the side door with a binder under his arm. Lemuel Crandall, 50 years old, gray coming in at the temples, a green beret folded flat in his cargo pocket, and a Special Forces tab faded nearly white on his shoulder. He was Group Operations, 28 years a soldier, and he walked the way men walk when they have spent a career counting exits without being told to. He glanced at the corner desk. It was nothing. A half second. The kind of look a busy man gives a room he is passing through. But the look caught on something and snagged, and his step slowed, just slightly. The way a record slows when a thumb brushes the edge. He kept walking. At the doorway, he stopped. He looked back at the woman at the corner desk one more time, and he frowned, like a man hearing a song he could not place, 3 notes he knew, and a 4th he could not reach. Then the printer jammed, and someone called his name, and the day swallowed him. The woman at the corner desk turned a page. By mid-morning, the orderly room had found its rhythm, which, in an orderly room, means the slow grind of other people's lives turned into other people's forms. Leave requests, awards, packets. A transfer that had been sitting 11 days because nobody would own it. The work of keeping 800 soldiers fed into the machine that the Army runs on, which is not bullets, but paper. It was paper that nearly went wrong. A young soldier, a private, 8 weeks out of his processing station, still flinching at every sergeant's voice, picked up an unmarked manila folder from the out tray and tucked it under his arm to courier across to the secure side of the building. He did it the way you do a thing 40 times a day. He did not open it. He did not check it. Keene was up from the corner desk before the private reached the door. She did not hurry. That was the thing Crandall would remember later, when he let himself remember. She did not hurry, and she did not call out. She simply rose, crossed the floor on a line that put her between the private and the door without seeming to, and put 2 fingers on the edge of the folder. "That one stays here," she said. The private blinked. Sergeant Dunmore said, "It stays here." She took the folder, opened it just enough, closed it. Inside, on the top sheet, a stamp in red. Secret. A personnel security packet, sleeved wrong, sitting in an open tray. One careless walk from going out a door, it was never cleared to cross. This is a closed-cover document. It does not move in an open folder, and it does not move without a courier card and a log entry. Army Regulation 380-5. The paragraph applies to the folder. Not to you. She said it without weight. She said it the way you would tell someone the time. She re-sleeved the document in a marked classified cover from the supply shelf, logged it in the book by the cage, and set it where it belonged. The whole thing took 90 seconds. She did not raise her voice. She had never, in her life, needed to. A senior sergeant by the cage had watched the save. "Good catch," he said, to the room more than to anyone. "Could have been a real bad day." Dunmore was at the cage in 5 steps. "Yeah, I've been on these kids about the trays all week," he said. "Gotta stay on top of it." He let the credit settle on him like a coat he had not bought. He did not look at the woman who had actually crossed the floor. Keene let him have it. She went back to the corner desk and squared her forms. Crandall had come back in for his binder, and he stood now in the side doorway, with it forgotten under his arm. He had seen the whole thing. He had seen her rise without hurry. He had seen the line she walked. He had seen her read a red stamp at a glance and recite a regulation paragraph the way other people recite their own phone number. And he had seen her hand the credit to a sergeant who had done nothing and not blink. There were 100 ways to read a soldier, and Crandall had spent 28 years learning every one of them. Most people gave themselves away with effort. The squared shoulders of a man trying to look unafraid, the loud competence of someone who needed you to see it. The dangerous ones gave nothing away at all. They had been stripped down somewhere hard until only the necessary motion was left, and what was left looked, to the untrained eye, like a person who did not matter. He had served with exactly one officer who moved like that. On one team, in 1 year, he kept in a footlocker he did not open. The woman at the corner desk moved like her, not similar to her, like her. He watched her sit. He watched her set her back to the wall without appearing to choose the chair that did it. He watched her square a stack of paper, edge true to a desk, and his mouth went dry. "Where do I know you from?" he said under his breath. To no one. He did not have it yet. But that night, in his quarters, Master Sergeant Lemuel Crandall pulled an old roster out of a footlocker. He did not open often, a printout soft at the folds, and he ran his thumb slowly down a column of names and call signs from a year he had spent a long time trying not to think about. By the third day, the joke had a name, and the name was Clerk. It is a small word. That is what made it useful. Dunmore did not have to shout it. He could lay it down soft and let it do its work. "Clerk, the recycling." "Clerk, you're in the walkway." "Clerk, those go in numerical. Did they not cover numerical at Clerk school?" Each one landed light. Each one taught the room a lesson about who mattered, which is the only lesson a man like Dunmore ever truly teaches. Someone printed a sign and taped it to the corner desk. "New office clerk," it read, in a font meant to be funny. Keene came in at 0700, saw it, and removed it without a change in her face. She folded it once, set it in the drawer, rather than the trash, a date, a fact, a thing that had happened, and squared her stack of forms. She kept a small green notebook. Into it, in a hand small and level, she wrote things that were not complaints. A date, a time, a sentence with no adjectives in it. The private nearly couriered a closed cover document. Tuesday, 10:40. Sign on desk, Wednesday, 0700. She wrote the way a person writes who has learned that the truth, set down plainly and early, outlives anyone's memory of how they felt about it. It was Brink who paid for the joke without making it. "Clerk's behind on the filing," Dunmore told the specialist on Thursday, loud by the copier. "Dump your overflow on her, and log her late. She rolled in at 7:05. He said it knowing Brink had been at the desk at 06:55 and had watched Keene walk in at 06:58, early, the way she was early every day. Brink stood with the stack of overflow in her arms and did the arithmetic that every junior soldier eventually has to do, the one where you weigh a sergeant's mood against your own small store of nerve. "Sergeant," she said. Her voice came out thinner than she wanted. "She wasn't late. I was at the desk. She was early." The bay went a half-degree quieter. Dunmore turned slowly. "You correcting me, specialist?" "No, Sergeant, Brink swallowed. "I'm telling you what the time was. Log her at 7:05. He held the girl's eyes until she looked down. "Clerk's invisible until I need filing done. You're invisible until I tell you what you saw. Understand?" Keene watched from the corner desk. She did not move. She did not speak, but she set down her pen, and she looked at Specialist Tova Brink across the room for exactly 1 second. And in that second, something passed between them that Brink would not understand until much later. Not gratitude, not pity. Something closer to a promise that had not been made yet. Then Keene picked up her pen and wrote one line in the green notebook. Specialist instructed to falsify a time entry, Thursday, 09:20. Declined. You have watched people be small. Everyone has. You have stood in a room while a person with a little power used it to make someone else smaller, and you have felt the thing rise in your chest that has no good name, the heat that wants to do something and cannot. Hold on to that. The woman at the corner desk is holding it too. She is just better at it than you are, and she has a reason you do not know yet. If you want to be standing here when that reason walks through the door, stay where you are. This one is worth your patience. Subscribe to Honor Tales and let it play. At the end of the day, Keen closed the green notebook. She set 2 fingers flat on its cover and left them there for half a beat, the way some people touch a door frame before they leave a house. Then she put it in the drawer with the folded sign, and she looked at nothing at all. On the 5th day, Dunmore stopped using the joke as a weapon and started using paper. It is the more dangerous of the two. A joke dies when the room gets bored. Paper does not get bored. Paper goes into a file, and the file goes up a chain. And somewhere, a person who has never met you makes a small mark next to your name, and your week becomes a different week. He drafted a memorandum. He was careful with it. Men like Dunmore are always careful with the things that protect them and careless with the things that protect everyone else. The memo said that the new transfer, he never used her name, only the transfer, the individual, the clerk, in quotes once and then dropped, had mishandled personnel records, that a roster had gone missing on her watch, that a file had been compromised. He submitted it up to the personnel chain with a request that the individual's building access be reviewed. By 1100, Keen's in-processing badge carried a flag. Pending review. She found out the way you find out about these things, which is by trying to badge through a door that had opened for her all week and watching the light go red. She stood at the door for a moment. She did not push it again. She turned, walked the long way around through the bay where the door was propped, and went back to the corner desk. Here is what the memo did not say, because the man who wrote it knew it better than anyone. There was no missing roster. There was a roster Dunmore had altered. For 3 months he had been padding the duty roster, listing himself for shifts he traded away, burying leave he took and never logged, shaving the numbers so his section's readiness looked a few points cleaner than it was, and so his own time looked a little more dutiful than it had been. The missing roster was the original, the true one, the one whose numbers did not match the version he had filed. He had not lost it. He had needed it gone, and the simplest way to make a true document disappear is to accuse someone else of losing it. Keen knew arithmetic. She had glanced at the readiness screen on Tuesday, the way she glanced at everything, once, completely, and the numbers had not closed. A unit of that size did not carry the on-hand strength the roster claimed, not with the leave calendar showing what it showed. The total was off by 11. She had not said a word. She had simply remembered it, the way she remembered the secret stamp and the regulation paragraph, and the exact second Tova Brink had told the truth and been told to unsee it. "I need your statement," Dunmore told Brink that afternoon, sliding a printed page across the copier's lid. "Just confirms the clerk's been sloppy with the files. Sign at the bottom." He smiled, and the smile was the worst thing he had done all week, because it was friendly. "Help me out, and I'll remember it. I pinned Staff Sergeant Friday. Good time to have helped me out." Brink looked at the page. She looked at the line at the bottom, waiting for her name. "I didn't see her be sloppy with anything," she said. "You'll see it when you sign it." He left the page on the copier. "Think about your evaluation specialist. Think about who writes it." Brink did not sign it. She also did not throw it away. She stood there with it, caught. The way you are caught when the cost of doing right is real, and the person asking you to do wrong controls your next 18 months. She put it in her own drawer. She would think about it. That was all she could promise herself, that she would think about it. Across the bay, Master Sergeant Crandall picked up a phone. He did it quietly, from the operations office with the door half closed. He had spent 2 nights with the soft-folded roster, and he had found the 4th note he could not reach. He knew the call sign now. He had heard it on a net 15 years ago, on a night he did not talk about. The voice of the officer who had walked his recovery team and 2 rescued aid workers out of a valley that should have kept all of them. "It's Crandall," he said into the phone. "I need you to pull the incoming command roster, the new Group 6. A pause. Just read me the name. Read me the name and the prior assignments." He listened, his jaw set. "Yeah, spell the call sign for me." He listened to it spelled. He closed his eyes. Across the room, on the wide screen above the coffee station, the welcome packet for the incoming commander cycled up on the unit feed, the way it had cycled all week without anyone reading it. A slideshow nobody watched. A photograph. A name. A line of assignments. A faded combat decoration. Crandall, the phone still at his ear, read it, and went very still. He found her the next morning in the arms room hallway, the one stretch of the building with no cameras and no audience, a corridor of cold metal doors where the light was bad and the foot traffic was none. She was there because she had learned the building's quiet places the way she learned every building's quiet places, without meaning to, by Tuesday. He came down the hall, and he slowed, and a thing happened in his body that he did not fully command. His spine straightened, his shoulders came back, his chin leveled. Not quite the position of attention. The ghost of it. The body's memory arriving a half-second before the mind gives permission. He stopped 2 paces from her. He looked at her for a long moment. And he said one word. "Lo," and he said it like a question. Like a man knocking on a door he was not sure he was allowed to open. "Nightjar?" Keene did not answer right away. She set 2 fingers flat against the cold steel of the doorframe beside her and left them there for half a beat. Then she looked at him. Really looked, the way she had not let herself look at anyone in 5 days. And she gave the smallest shake of her head. Not no. Not here. Not yet. Crandall understood. He had spent a career understanding things that were said without being said. He gave a single nod, the kind that closes a subject and seals it. "Mom," he said, and the word came out rough. He did not say it again. He turned and walked the other way, and he carried what he knew like a man carrying a full cup down a moving deck. He found Dunmore an hour later by the motor pool door. "Sergeant Dunmore." Crandall did not raise his voice either. He had learned it from better people than himself. A word. Dunmore came over with the loose swagger of a man 3 days from a promotion he was sure of. "Master Sergeant." "Pull the complaint." Crandall let it sit. "The one against the transfer. The new clerk. Whatever you've been calling her. Pull it, walk it back, and walk away from her. Today." Something flickered in Dunmore's face. Surprise. Then the quick recalculation of a man deciding whether he was being threatened. He decided he was not. That was his mistake, and it was a deep one. The kind a certain kind of man makes his whole life, until the day it finally costs him everything at once. He read Crandall's quiet as weakness. He read the careful voice as fear of paperwork. "With respect, Master Sergeant," he said, and there was no respect in it. "I documented a problem. That's the system working. If the schoolhouse sent us somebody who can't keep a file straight, that's not on me." He smiled. "I pinned Staff Sergeant Friday. Nothing's touching me." Crandall looked at him for a long, long moment. He thought about saying more. He thought about the cold door frame and the half-beat of 2 fingers against steel, and the word he had not been allowed to say out loud. He decided the kindest thing he could do, and the only thing he was permitted to do, was to give the man one more chance to walk. "Pull the complaint, Sergeant. Walk away from the clerk. Last time I'll say it kindly." "Or what?" Dunmore was already turning. "I'll see you at the formation, Master Sergeant. Wear your beret. Might be photographers." He walked off, whistling. Crandall watched him go. This man whistling his way toward a Friday he did not understand was a cliff. "Friday," the Master Sergeant said quietly, to the empty motor pool door. "The way you say a word over someone who cannot hear you yet." You want to know who she is. You have wanted to know since the first morning, and the man in the hallway nearly told you, and then the moment closed. So here it is, the part Sergeant Dunmore will never get to hear, the part that belongs to you alone. That night, in a bare set of temporary quarters, with a single lamp burning, Rosalind Keene sat on the edge of a borrowed bed and looked at a uniform laid over the chair across from her. It wasn't the plain set she had worn all week. It was the one she had not put on. On the shoulder, the silver eagle of a colonel. Above the pocket, the arched tab, Special Forces, and beside it the Ranger tab, and the combat patch worn on the right that meant she had carried that uniform into a war and brought it back. Master Parachutist Wings, a row of ribbons whose colors most of the soldiers in that orderly room would not have been able to name, and at the front of that row, a small one, pale blue and white, that the older men would have stood up for. She had earned the eagle behind a desk and the ribbon under fire, and she knew which one had cost more. In the spring of 2011, she had been 30 years old and a captain, and she had commanded a detachment of 12 men. Their call sign on the net was a bird that hunts at dusk. Hers, as the commander, was Nightjar 6. The mission had been a recovery. 2 aid workers, a man and a woman, taken off a road and held in a compound in a valley that the maps lied about. The kind of job that is all arithmetic until it is suddenly all blood. Distance to the breach point, 800 meters of broken ground. Time on the objective, a number she had carried like a stone ever since. The infiltration in the dark, the dogs, the long crawl, the breach, the 2 frightened civilians who did not believe they were being rescued until they were in the trucks. She had walked every meter of that infiltration in her mind, 100 times before her boots ever touched the ground, because that was the part of the job nobody put on a recruiting poster, the hours of cold planning that bought the seconds of speed. She had chosen the breach point off a single seam in a wall. She had timed the dog handler's circuit at 4 minutes and 20 seconds and built the whole approach inside that window. When the woman aid worker had refused to move, frozen, certain the men in the dark were a new set of captors and not a rescue, it had been Keene who knelt in front of her in the noise and said her name, her real name, the one the planners had given Keene to memorize for exactly this moment, and watch the disbelief crack open into something a person could be led out by. Small, exact, faithful things. The mission lived or died on them. And the exfil, which is where the arithmetic always tries to kill you. A position they had not seen on the overheads opened up on the high ground as the team moved to the trucks. The geometry of it was bad. The rescued in the open, the team strung across 40 meters of exposed ground, the enemy fire walking down the line toward the soft middle where the 2 civilians stumbled. Staff Sergeant Isaiah Toves was her team sergeant, 29 years old, a man who laughed easily and shot well and called her mom in a way that managed to mean something more like sister. He saw the geometry the same instant she did. He did not wait for the order because the order would have come too late, and he knew it, and he had decided a long time ago what kind of man he was going to be. In the half-second the rest of us never have to face. He stepped into the gap. He put his body and his fire between the high ground and the soft middle, and he held there, and the line moved, and the trucks filled, and the 2 aid workers went home to people who would never know his name. He held until the team was clear. He did not come clear himself. Over the net, in a voice that did not shake because she would not let it, Captain Rosalind Keene had said 3 words that the men on that frequency never forgot. Nightjar 6, bring them home. And they had brought everyone home except one. They gave her a silver star for that night. She had stood very straight while the general read the citation, and she had thought the whole time about a man stepping sideways into the dark. The call sign was not a trophy, it was a debt. Nightjar 6. She had been paying it for 15 years, and she paid a little of it every day in small, private ways, by squaring every stack of paper edge true, by setting 2 fingers flat against cold steel before anything that mattered. A count. Always the same count, for the one she did not bring home. There had been another man on the net that night, a sergeant first class, the team's senior weapons man, call sign Halyard. He had lived. He had gone on to other teams and other valleys, and in 2021 the Army had told her, in a phone call she took standing up, that Halyard was killed in action overseas, and that his body had not been recovered. She had set 2 fingers flat against the wall and counted to 2 and gone back to work, because that was the job. She looked now at the uniform on the chair and at the eagle she would put on in the morning, and she thought about the complaint sitting in a personnel file with her access flagged, and about the falsified rosters stapled behind it, and she felt nothing she would have called anger. Sergeant Dunmore had written, in his own hand, a detailed record of his harassment of a junior soldier he believed could not touch him. He had attached to it the very documents whose numbers would not close. He had built, with great care, the case against himself, and he had filed it into the one system that does not get bored and does not forget. She would not have to do a single thing. The institution she had given her life to was bigger than both of them, and it was already moving. She laid the uniform flat. She squared the silver eagle to the seam of the shoulder, edge true, the way she squared everything. Then she turned out the light. Thursday, the day before the ceremony, Dunmore crossed the line he had been walking toward all week. The bay was busy with the small theater that precedes a promotion, someone polishing the unit colors, someone setting out folding chairs, someone testing a microphone that squealed and was hushed. Dunmore moved through it like the man of the hour, because tomorrow he would be. And he had decided that the last thing he needed in his bay during his prep was the clerk. Corridor clerk. He said it as he swept past her desk, and he did not break stride, and that was somehow worse. That she had become a thing he could order out of a room without even slowing down. Real soldiers are prepping a real ceremony. Go stand in the corridor. That's where clerks belong. Watch how it's done. Keene rose from the corner desk. She gathered her in-processing file, the one she had been working through all week. Dunmore took it out of her hands. He did it casually, the way you take a magazine off a waiting room table. He pulled the file from her grip, glanced at it, and tossed it onto a side cabinet. Then his eye fell on the small green notebook beside her keyboard, and some instinct in him, the animal sense that small men have for the one thing that can hurt them, made him pick it up too. He weighed it in his hand. He did not open it. He dropped it in the trash can by the desk on top of the coffee grounds, and he smiled. Corridor, he said again. The bay had gone quiet in the way bays do when everyone is pretending not to watch. Tova Brink stood by the copier with her hand half raised and no words in it. Across the room, Master Sergeant Crandall stood in the operations doorway, with his arms folded and his face like a closed door. Keene reached into the trash can. She lifted the green notebook out by its spine, 2 fingers, and she wiped the cover once against her sleeve, unhurried. She squared it against her palm, and then she looked at Sergeant Kyle Dunmore, and she smiled at him. It was a small smile. It did not reach for anything. It was not the smile of someone planning a revenge, because she was not planning one. The revenge had already been written, by him and filed. It was something quieter and far more final than that. The smile of a person who has seen the whole shape of a thing and knows exactly how it ends, watching someone take the last step toward the edge of it. Brink saw the smile and went cold to her fingertips. "Why is she smiling?" she whispered, to no one. Crandall saw it too, from the doorway, and the old master sergeant, who had buried friends, who did not frighten, felt something close to pity move through him for the sergeant in the middle of the bay, because Crandall knew that smile. He had seen it once, 15 years ago, on a net in the dark, a half-second before everything changed. Keene said nothing. She tucked the green notebook into her cargo pocket, picked her in-processing file back up off the cabinet, and walked to the corridor without a word, the way she had been told, because the orders of the institution were the orders of the institution, even when the man giving them was small. Crandall crossed the bay and stopped beside Brink at the copier. He spoke low, so only she could hear. "Specialist, the formation tomorrow. Be there. Front rank." He let that sit. "Whatever you saw this week, be standing where you can see it through." Brink looked up at him. "Master Sergeant, what's going to happen?" Crandall watched the corridor, where the woman with no rank had just gone to stand. "The truth," he said. "Tomorrow, the truth's got a formation to be at." Friday came up clear and hot, the sky over Fort Bragg the hard, bright blue of early summer, and at 0900, the headquarters bay of 3rd Special Forces Group, filled with soldiers in their uniforms for the promotion of Sergeant Kyle Dunmore to the rank of Staff Sergeant. He stood front and center, exactly where he had always pictured himself. His boots were right, his chin was up, his section stood in the ranks behind him, Tova Brink in the front row, because a master sergeant had told her to be, the unit colors hanging still in the breezeless room, the dagger and the 3 lightning bolts. Folding chairs along the side held a few families. A photographer checked his light. The adjutant stepped to the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats. We're honored this morning to be joined by the incoming commander of 3rd Special Forces Group, who has agreed to preside." A rustle, the ordinary rustle of a room settling. Presiding over this promotion, the incoming commander, Colonel Rosalind Keene. Dunmore's eyes were front. The name went past him without landing. Colonel Rosalind Keene. He had never been told the incoming commander's name. Men like him do not read the welcome packet. They read the room, and the room had told him all week who mattered. He stood at attention and waited for some colonel he had never met to walk in and hand him his rank. The double doors at the end of the bay opened. Command Sergeant Major DeWitt Osei's voice cracked across the room like a rifle. "Group, attention!" 500 boots came together as one, and through the doors, alone, unhurried, walked the woman from the corner desk. She wore the uniform now, the silver eagle of a colonel on her shoulder, the Special Forces tab and the Ranger tab, the combat patch on the right, the master parachutist wings and the row of ribbons, and the pale blue and white one at the front of the row. Her hair was the same. Her stillness was the same. Her eyes did the same thing they had done on the first morning. Door, window, exit, the count older than thought, and then came to rest, without heat, on the man standing front and center, with his rank waiting to be pinned. From the front rank, low and clear, in a voice that carried because the room had gone so silent, Master Sergeant Lemuel Crandall said 2 words. "Nightjar 6, and the older men in the ranks, the ones with faded tabs and gray at the temples, the ones who had been on nets in valleys the maps lied about, turned their heads a fraction of a degree, and their faces changed. 2 words. To most of the room they meant nothing. A call sign was a call sign, a piece of old radio noise. But to the men who had carried rucks across the worst years of 2 long wars, a call sign was a person, and a person was a debt, and some debts you stand up for without being told. A staff sergeant in the 3rd rank straightened a spine that had not been that straight in a decade. A warrant officer by the colors closed his eyes for the length of one breath. The story Sergeant Dunmore had been telling himself all week, the story where he was the soldier and she was the clerk, died in that bay without a sound, and everyone felt it die, except for one more second, the man it was about. Colonel Garrett Lufkin, the outgoing commander, stood from his seat at the side, crossed to the center, and put a hand briefly on the microphone. "Sergeant Dunmore," he said, and his voice was dry and amused and final. "Allow me to introduce your incoming commanding officer." Dunmore's face began to move. It came apart in stages, the way these things do, slowly, and then all at once. First, confusion, a small frown, the look of a man whose two worlds have produced the same face and who does not yet understand why. Then disbelief, as the corner desk and the Silver Eagle refused to be the same person, and then, horribly, were. Then recognition, full and total, the week replaying behind his eyes at a speed that must have been unbearable. The coffee, the sign, the corridor, the green notebook in the trash. That's where clerks belong. Nothing's touching me. And then, last, the thing under all of it. Horror. His mouth opened. What came out was barely a voice at all. "Ma'am, I didn't know. At ease, Sergeant." Keene's voice was level and not unkind. She walked to the center of the bay and stood in front of him. And she was not a large woman, and it did not matter at all. She took the staff sergeant rank from the adjutant's tray. She pinned it on. By the book, squared to the seam, edge true, her hand steady and exact. Because the orders had been cut weeks ago, and a promotion is the Army's act and not one man's, and the institution she had bled for did not bend itself to punish or to spare any single soldier in a single moment. The rank went on straight. She stepped back. She looked him in the eyes, and she spoke quietly, so that it was almost only for him. "The Army promoted you, Sergeant. It saw something in you worth the rank. Whether you turn out to deserve it, that part isn't mine, and it isn't this morning's. That's yours, every day, starting now. Wear it honestly." Sergeant Dunmore, Staff Sergeant Dunmore, for the length of one more hour, brought his hand up in a salute that shook. Colonel Rosalind Keene squared to him and returned it, crisp and clean and without a tremor. And only then, as her hand came down, did Command Sergeant Major DeWitt Osei step forward out of the front rank with a folder in his hand. The reckoning did not come with shouting. The good ones never do. Command Sergeant Major Osei's folder held three things, and together they were the end of the morning's second story. The first was the complaint Sergeant Dunmore had filed against the transfer, a memorandum in his own words, on his own initiative, describing in detail a campaign of contact with a junior soldier that read to any reviewing authority as exactly what it was. He had meant it as a weapon. He had written and signed and filed a confession. The second was the readiness roster, the true one, the original Keene had glanced at on Tuesday. Recovered now from the system, Dunmore had not understood as well as he thought, whose numbers did not match the version he had submitted, off by 11, in his own favor. The third was a statement that did not exist because the specialist he had ordered to write it had refused. A flag went on to Staff Sergeant Dunmore's record before the families had finished filing out of the folding chairs. His new rank was suspended, pending an investigation that would, in the weeks to come, walk slowly and thoroughly through 3 months of altered rosters and unlogged leave and a pattern of conduct toward junior soldiers that more than one of them, once they understood they were safe to, would describe out loud. It is worth saying plainly what happened, because it is the part people get wrong about stories like this one. Colonel Keene did not arrest him. She did not stand him in front of the formation and take the rank back off his collar to a crowd satisfaction. She did none of the things the heat in your chest wanted her to do, because she had learned long ago that justice that performs for an audience is usually about the performer. She let the system do the unglamorous, durable work it was built for. The complaint routed to the Inspector General. The rosters routed to the personnel chain. The investigation opened on its own timeline, indifferent to anyone's anger. And that indifference was the whole point. It could not be charmed. It could not be intimidated 3 days from a promotion, and it did not get bored. Dunmore had spent a career betting that paper beats people. He had simply never met the person who understood paper better than he did. Colonel Keene did not gloat. She did not watch his face. She signed the routing sheet Osei handed her, set the pen down square to the folder's edge, and moved on, because there was a group to take command of, and the man was already, in every way that mattered, the institution's problem now, and no longer hers. She found Specialist Tova Brink by the colors after the bay had cleared. Specialist Brink. Keene stood in front of the girl who had carried her a coffee on the first morning and refused to sign a lie on the 5th. You were ordered to write something false by a sergeant who controlled your evaluation 3 days before his promotion. And you didn't do it. No, ma'am. Brink's voice was steady now. It wasn't true. I know what that cost you to hold. I watched you hold it all week. Keene let the silence say the rest of it. You told the truth when it cost you something. That is the whole job, Specialist. Everything else is detail. Remember it. She had already spoken to Master Sergeant Crandall. The paperwork that would move Tova Brink out of that orderly room and onto a leadership development track was, by lunch, the first routing sheet of Keene's command. You felt it rise in you on the 3rd day, the heat with no good name, watching a small man make a room smaller. You have felt it in your own life, in rooms with no colonel coming through the door to set it right. So let this be the thing you take from a made-up story about made-up people. The woman did not win by becoming him. She won by being, exactly and without exception, the thing he could not imagine her to be. Patient and honest and unafraid. If a story about quiet dignity outlasting cruelty is the kind of story you needed today, you are not alone, and there are more of them here. Subscribe to Honor Tales and stay a while. Late that afternoon, when the headquarters had gone quiet, Colonel Rosalind Keene walked alone to the memorial wall at the edge of the group's grounds. It was a low wall of dark stone, and on it were cut the names of the men of that lineage who had not come home, rank and name, year after year, a column of them in the hard afternoon light. She found the one she had come for without searching, because she had known where it would be before she arrived, the way you always know. Staff Sergeant Isaiah Toves. She set 2 fingers flat against the stone, just below the name, and she left them there. She counted, the way she always counted, the same count, the one that squared every stack of paper and steadied every hand. She did not speak. There was nothing to say to him that she had not been saying every day for 15 years in the language of small, exact, faithful things. Her secure phone vibrated against her hip. She took it out. A message, from a routing she did not recognize, through a channel that should not have been able to reach her. The kind of message that doesn't exist until it is in your hand. 6 words and a name. And the name was a name the Army had told her. Standing up in 2021 belonged to a man whose body was never recovered. Nightjar 6, low tide. Halyard. And below it, 1 line. A port city on a coast a long way from Fort Bragg, where the tide was already going out. Colonel Rosalind Keene stood very still at the wall, with 2 fingers against the name of one lost man and a message in her hand from another. The afternoon light lay flat and gold across the stone. Somewhere behind her, a flag line ticked against its pole in a wind that had finally come up. She closed the screen. She let her fingers rest one more half-beat against Isaiah Toves's name. Then she squared her shoulders, turned from the wall, and walked back toward the headquarters of the group she now commanded, where there was a great deal of work to do, and where, it seemed, the past was not as finished as the army had told her it was. Every soldier carries a story that few ever hear. Listen with your heart. Thank you for staying and watching. Subscribe to Honor Tales for more.